All right. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited to have Forrest Dombrow join me today. Forrest runs Profitable by Design, where he helps B2B service business owners who struggle to scale their revenue through his powerful system, the PBD growth machine. And Forrest, you're going to tell us more about the system. That's the topic of this discussion. So, Forrest, you've spoken at top marketing conferences all over the US, authored the top selling book Clone the Ace. And by the way, stay on this podcast. We're going to give away a digital copy of this book, and I'll mention the link later on in this podcast. So stay tuned. Um, and you started and successfully sold several businesses. Forrest has worked with owners, marketers, and salespeople from hundreds of companies worldwide, even selling services to giants like Amazon, Costco, and Google. Forrest, when you're not busy building businesses, you'll most likely to be found spending time with your family or out on the golf course. Was that a good introduction?
That was perfect. Almost as if I wrote it for you.
All right. Anything, anything you want to add before we dive into this podcast interview?
No, I think you captured most of it. It is all about systems for me, and so we'll get into that as we move forward here.
Awesome. And then, so we recently reconnected at Agency Con where we met in person.
Mhm.
You spoke at Agency Con. So I'd like to set the stage by so I'm the owner of a digital marketing SEO agency. I do 98% of all the selling, the sales calls.
Mhm.
I find that it's easier for me to close a deal, a sales call, because I'm the owner of the business. When I
Right.
speak with somebody, right, we're already on the same level.
Yeah.
If a salesperson talks to the owner of a business, it's way more difficult, right? So for me, I find sales to be an easy thing, to be honest. I don't sell, I educate
Yeah.
and just try to find out if we're a good fit for each other.
Sure.
And like my closing rate is extremely high because they talk to the right person. So
Yeah.
I think this podcast targets other agencies. So if you own a SEO agency, digital marketing agency, or if you're the owner of a business, this is the podcast you want to listen to. Anything else you want to add before we get started here?
No, I think what you shared at the beginning there is pretty common, but sometimes people want to get beyond themselves. And even though maybe nobody could ever be as good as the owner, I think in my book, Clone the Ace, we're going to start to pull apart some things and give you some options to be pretty close to the owner.
Okay, awesome. All right, so Forrest, you often mention a critical problem in digital marketing sales where one salesperson handles every element of the sales cycle, frequently leading to burnout, inconsistent results, and poor profitability by design. How can agency owners recognize when they're stuck in this cycle? And what's the very first step you'd recommend to shift toward a better designed, profitable sales approach? Loaded question, huh?
Well, the first sign is what you described yourself. You're doing it all yourself. So if you're the owner and you're trying to grow a business beyond yourself, you can't always be the only salesperson. So that's the first sign. The other sign is if you only have, let's say, one salesperson or maybe two or three, and you kind of have them doing everything. One of the reasons why you and other owners tend to be successful is they're passionate, they're the owners, so they have authority, but they also typically, like, SEO really well. Average salespeople might not know SEO that well or nearly as well as you. So one of the things you have to start to do after you notice you have one person trying to do it all is to start to pull apart the pieces of the sales process, because there's hunting and getting leads if they're not coming from marketing, and then there's closing, and then there's the admin piece. But within closing and doing the sales process, there's a couple of parts. There's fielding the lead and doing discovery. But one of the big changes you can make to make things more scalable and produce results similar to the owner is have a really good salesperson with an administrator to handle the meeting bookings and all the busy work if you're big enough. And here's the key: to start using sales engineers. So I've gone into other digital marketing agencies that were selling SEO and paid search and other things. And for a while, I acted as the salesperson. And I said, hey, I don't know SEO as well as your SEO team. We need them in the sales call. So that starts to pull apart all the pieces, such that you don't have to hire sales unicorns that are supposed to know everything from admin to subject matter expertise to actual sales skills. And that's how you can start to notice and start to get beyond one person being overwhelmed, whether that's the owner or anybody else.
All right, all right. So, in your book, you highlight the importance of creating a scalable sales system rather than depending on ad hoc, unpredictable sales efforts. Practically speaking, could you outline for us what a well-designed, scalable sales system looks like for
Mhm.
smaller agencies ready to embrace your profitable by design principles?
Sure. So we just addressed the first part of it, is really just understanding the different parts. The more you have one person that has to be good at everything, that decreases scalability. Beyond that, you need to have an optimized sales process. You have to have the right steps. So in a typical agency, even a small agency, that would look like a strategic discovery call, not just an ad hoc asking random questions. And then maybe a research process to put a presentation deck together that has a little bit of an enlightening education. And you create that deck as a template, so it's pretty easy to fill out. That makes it more scalable. Um, and then, having your CRM set up and using other templates. So don't just go into a discovery meeting, whether it's you or anybody else. Have a list of standard questions. And so when you start to pull things apart, build it out, and document, that's how you start to make it more and more scalable.
Awesome. Do you still work with agencies if somebody's interested in hiring you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Um, awesome. So I'm super intrigued by the $50 per month marketing plan approach that helps you build your own seven-figure agency. Can you explain a bit more about this pretty low budget yet powerful strategy and give our listeners some actionable advice on quickly implementing this profitable by design tactic for consistent lead generation?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer in two parts. The first part is what I did for $50 a month, and then the underlying principles. So, when we started our agency, I wasn't really a salesperson, honestly, and we lost our salesperson. And I said, "Oh, I'll do it. Give me $50 a month." And so I came up with a very simple strategy: network, go to at least 4 networking events a month, and speak at least once a month. And it was literally 3 bullet points. Those were the first two. And the third bullet point was, you can always do more, but you can never do less. And so the reason why that simple strategy worked is I was super passionate about what we're doing, had a really unique elevator pitch at the time for digital agencies, saying things other people were not saying. And I just went out with my hair on fire, went to all these networking events and speaking. Now, the second part of the answer is, it's not really about networking or speaking. I'm not saying you should do that. But whatever you do, you have to be consistent about it, and you have to have a good message. So if you're going to speak, fine. If you're going to do webinars, if you're going to do something else, be consistent. That's really the lesson, and be good at it, whatever it is. So you don't have to spend a ton of money as long as you have a great message, passion, and consistency.
And I think that's how we connected probably 8+ years ago. I think it was at a meetup.
Yeah.
So naturally, that's how I started my business, right? I
Yeah,
started in the little leagues. I started at
exactly.
meetups and then, started to make my way up. And now if you do a search for international SEO expert, I'm at the very top in Google. I get invited to speak at some of the biggest conferences around the world.
Yeah,
And, I live by that principle. I need to be in front of people. Apparently, I do a good job presenting, speaking at these conferences.
yeah.
And man, whenever I have the chance to speak in front of an audience, it results into leads and business. So,
Yeah, and you just reminded me the other part of the story. So I started like you did, and I said to myself, and I came up with this thing called the molecular theory of marketing, which is simply just get out and interact with people, and you'll create reactions. And so I started the same way. I said, I'll just go to anything. I'll go to meetups, I'll go to whatever. And I ended up at some really weird meetups with like four women speaking about the movie The Secret in a coffee shop. So over time, of course, you refine and you optimize. But similar to you, because I started meeting people, I ended up eventually being invited to speak on a national speaking circuit at all the big marketing conferences. But it came out of starting small, just getting out there and mixing it up with people and having a good message. And then, yeah, then it became about much bigger, more impressive speaking engagements, but it started small. And so wherever you are, just get out the door, go meet people, have a good elevator pitch, and kind of go from there.
so talking about that, so we finally started our own podcast, right? And it's a bit of a production, it takes time, but man, I love doing these interviews. What's your take or advice for like agency owners like me who, don't do this quite yet? Is this something that you advise them to do, or any thoughts on running a podcast?
I don't have a lot of experience running a podcast. I've been on a bunch of podcasts. I think it's a good way to get out there and get your message out there. So I can't say one way or the other you should do podcasts, honestly. It's not my lane. But I've been using webinars recently, and we are killing it with webinars. So now I don't even have to go out. We've got invite strategies, and I'm booking. It's push button. I can book 5 to 7 qualified sales calls every 2 weeks. A month ago, we booked 26 sales calls off one webinar. So whether it's podcasts or webinars, I like to tell people whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever you have the resources to do, it's really ultimately about the message, because these are all megaphones, whether it's SEO, whether it's paid ads, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a live speaking engagement. They're just platforms for you to say stuff or write stuff. And if that stuff's generic and bland, it's not the podcast's fault. It's not the webinar's fault. It's your message's fault. So pick the strategy that seems to work for your target clients, but have a really killer message. That's my message.
Couldn't agree more. So we now actually run rolling like two webinars, a local SEO webinar, because there's
Mm,
a lot of local small businesses that need help with
yeah.
SEO, and then an AI and SEO webinar. I mean, it's a very hot topic. So we now do these webinars every other month because
Hmm.
things are changing rapidly. And man, we get three, four, 500 people signed up for these webinars, and now it's an evergreen page that we just slap on the new date, and man, it ranks at the top in Google.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great when you hit the right message and the right market. I had 830 people registered for my last webinar, and now we've scaled it back because we can't even handle that many sales calls. So, um,
Man, it's amazing. So if you're an agency owner listening to this or a small business owner, you definitely want to connect with Forrest on how to set up and run webinars. If that's what you advise on, it works amazingly well for
yeah,
us.
it definitely can.
Cool. All right. So, key principle of your profitable by design methodology is the idea of identifying and focusing on your profitable pond, target market aligned deeply with the agency's skill set, but without overwhelming competition. Can you share practical insights or actionable steps for agency owners looking to define and thrive in their own profitable pond?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're referring to in the book, there's a section on something I call the fishing framework.
Yeah.
And I go over four different ponds. So there's the empty pond, the crowded pond, the satisfied pond, and the profitable pond. Obviously, you want to be in the profitable pond. So just real quickly, the empty pond is when your target market is too narrow. Like let's say you want to target law firms in Minnesota that practice maritime law on the oceans. Well, there's no ocean nearby, right? So your pond is empty, right? That's an obvious example. The crowded pond would be, hey, we want to do websites for small businesses or SEO for small businesses. Well, there's tons of people doing that. There's lots of $99 a month nonsense. There's free website builders. So that's an example of a crowded pond. A satisfied pond would be where the people in the pond don't want what you're offering. So the example I use in the book is if you were to target, if you were a financial advisor and you were targeting super high net worth individuals, I mean people that have 50, $100 million net worth, they're not going to Google to find a financial advisor. They're getting referrals from the country club or whatever. So that would be a pond that they don't really need what you have if you're trying to advertise on say, paid search or SEO. The profitable pond is a pond that has the right fish in it, enough of them, but not too many, and low competition. And so it's not about finding the pond, it's about creating it. So let's go back to the crowded pond, websites for small businesses, that's crowded. But if you immediately said websites for yoga studios, now you just shrunk the pond. And that's not really a pond that exists out there anywhere. You create it. So it's not about finding a profitable pond. It's about creating a pond by figuring out who you can really serve well, and narrowing it down enough, but not too much. So one simple shortcut to do that is just say, I've got this service that fixes this problem for this relatively narrow target market.
So when I listened to your presentation at Agency Con, that was probably the one thing that resonated with me the most. And based on what you spoke about, we made a change. So I initially started this business, Boulder SEO Marketing, as a local Boulder-based SEO company. Then, expanded into Denver, and then all of a sudden, I wanted to get clients from all over the U.S. and even the
Wow.
world, right? So I think we lost focus over time a little bit. So we're actually refocusing, and we're opening satellite offices now in Fort Collins, Colorado Springs. We just put up the location pages. We're already on page one in Google for keywords like SEO agency Fort Collins, right? Because I think we had to like refocus. We are a Colorado-based business, so
Yeah.
hopefully that falls into your methodology. For us, it was more like, hey, let's think about what is our target market, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, geography is one way to do it. Industry is one way to do it. The other thing I coach people on is mixing and matching, right? So you could be um, digital marketing for yoga studios, or you could just be websites for yoga studios, or you could be websites and paid ads combo. So you can mix and match the types of specialization, but geography is certainly one you can use. We dominate in Fort Collins or whatever Colorado.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. All right, onward. So you frequently talk about moving from selling generic services to selling real, tangible results. Clearly articulating differentiation and a unique selling proposition. How specifically can agency owners applying your profitable by design system identify and express their unique differentiators in ways that immediately resonate deeply with ideal prospects?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first part of the answer is about selling outcomes. So I always like to say nobody ever in the history of man had bought SEO ever. They bought the promise of more money.
Yeah.
So don't just talk about SEO or paid search or whatever it is. talk about those ultimate outcomes, not even just rankings or traffic, that they don't even want that. It all has to tie up to I call it connecting to the cash, right? So first is identifying some of those outcomes. And, from there, that differentiation. So I'll give you an example. When I owned my agency, which I sold years ago, this is going to sound funny now, but at the time it was very different and related to that ultimate outcome of getting more money. So we started an agency. We were SEO and paid ads, and we kind of quickly just focused on paid ads because my partner that did SEO didn't want to do it. And I was a conversion rate optimization expert at the time, doing landing pages and things. This was back in 2007. And so I talked earlier about having a killer message or elevator pitch. So when I would go out networking, I would say this. People would say, "What do you do?" I say, "I own an agency. We do two things. We drive traffic to your website, and we convert that traffic to leads and sales for you." Most agencies only do the first part. And that's obvious now in 2025. But in 2007, people's minds were blown. And they would literally say, "I've never heard anybody say that." So figuring out what the outcome is that they really want and starting to talk about that, and even saying something like, "Look, I know you don't really want to do SEO. What you want is the outcome." And that in and of itself will differentiate you. You pair that with a profitable pond and a differentiation or a unique service mix. That's how you can start to quickly articulate or pick and articulate differentiation.
So that was the other message that resonated with me very clearly when I listened to your conversation. I think I made a big mistake for a long time where, I do these sales calls and they would be very long because I started to very, passionate about what I do and
Uh-huh.
explain and educate, right? But then I would try to explain everything that we do as part of getting people to the website, right? And
Right.
making them more money. And I ended up going down this rabbit hole where it'd be a 2 hour long conversation, right? The more I talk, the more they want to know exactly. So how do you do updates on Google Business Profile and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was such a long conversation. I explained everything in great detail, what we do, but I
Yeah.
didn't really talk about you know, you don't need to know all this stuff. That's what we do. All you need to worry about is like give us the money and then make sure we get you the results that you're looking for. So we
Right.
built a calculator, ROI calculator,
Uh-huh.
where I can show them now on a page by page basis, if they let us do what we need to do, the outcome could be XYZ, which could create, X amount of leads.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, so that resonated very well with
Yeah,
me.
quantifying the value is really important because at the end of the day, if we're selling outcomes, people will still come back to, and you have to be ready to answer the basic questions like, "Okay, that's great. I love that you're going to get me more money, but how many blog posts are you going to do every month? How many links are you going to build?" Right? So you still
Fair.
have to have that part of the conversation because people, they don't quite understand SEO or paid search in most cases like you as a salesperson do, or the owner. So you have to be able to answer some of that, but yeah, it's about those outcomes, quantifying the value. And I always like to say, I forget where I learned this from, but price is only an objection in the absence of value. So if you
Interesting.
haven't demonstrated how what you're going to do, the blog posts or the technical essay, whatever you're going to do, if you haven't clearly demonstrated how you're going to drive the outcome and how much, then people might balk. "Well, that's $5,000 a month." Yeah, but I just showed you how we're going to make you $20,000 a month. So it's only an objection when you don't show the value. When you do and you make it clear and you're confident about it, because this goes back to picking your profitable pond in your target market. There's another concept I share in the book called winnable games. Winnable games in the sense that you have a target market where you can be successful because you're well positioned, but also winnable games in the sense that if these people come on because they're the ideal client, you're going to win. You're going to produce a great outcome because you already know when people have these circumstances, we can really help them. As opposed to, you need SEO, sure, sign here, and then you get all these accounts that don't quite fit your skills and they have unrealistic expectations. So it all starts to fit together, and it starts with that definition of the profitable pond.
Absolutely. So, talking about your book, we're going to put a link right below in the description field of this YouTube video. So, all you have to do is click on that link and you have access to Forrest's book, which I'm very thankful for. Forrest, thank you so much for giving
Sure.
away that book. So, lastly, one powerful promise in your book, Clone the Ace. Again, link right below in the description field of the YouTube video, is transforming average or even struggling salespeople into consistently high performing aces.
Yeah.
What's one immediately actionable, profitable by design strategy, tactic, or quick tip you've seen dramatically elevate the performance of sales teams you've personally worked with?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer it slightly different at the beginning, and then we'll get to the tip. So I had a gentleman reach out to me on LinkedIn who bought my book off Amazon. Didn't know him, never worked with him, and he shared with me literally right out of what you just said. He said our sales team was a digital agency, and he said our sales team has about 25 people. I am in the middle of the pack all the time. I rarely hit quota, and I wanted to reach out to you because I read your book and I implemented a few of the things, and I am now the top salesperson by far. I am at 500% quota pretty frequently, and I gave the book to my friend or my coworker, and he's now number two right behind me. So you can get massive results. You can go from average to superstar just by reading the book, even if you never work with me. And I asked him, I actually got on the phone with him at one point, and he told me the things that really stood out were, and the thing to answer your question, understanding how to do a good discovery call. There's two kinds of discovery. There's technical discovery and business discovery. And most people are good at technical discovery, asking the basic questions. What's your website built on? Just the things, do they qualify, right? Maybe you only work on e-commerce. So you're just asking basic questions. That's technical discovery. Where people don't do as good of a job and where you can really separate yourself is the business discovery. That's turning from an order taker, just do you have this, do you have that, do you have this, to a strategic business advisor, if you will, and asking deeper questions. Why do you even want to do SEO? What are your goals, and really digging in. And so in the book, there are 7 magic questions you can use that are really more on the business discovery side. So the number one tip to answer your question to make a big leap right away is get really good at discovery, both parts of it. Create a document so everybody's asking the same questions and you can have a strategic conversation that also builds scalability. I've often, because I do such a good discovery, in fact, it just happened. Someone paid me $1,500 for my sales process and then ended up hiring me. Why? Because I asked really smart, deep business questions and had a business conversation with them, and not just yeah, we do SEO, we build 4 links a month and we do that and you're signed here. That's not strategic. So that's the number one thing. The second thing that he shared with me that he took from the book was the way I teach how to do presentations of your services. And it's a little bit long to get into, but the one point you should read the book and it's in there. I go slide by slide and show you. But the one thing is to deliver what I call enlightening education. So that means I'm going to do a little bit of SEO research or paid search research or whatever I'm trying to sell and show people things that they don't know, so that I get on the call when I'm going through the pitch deck, and it's designed in a very specific way, people saying, wow, nobody else told me that. When you hear that, the cash register will be ringing any minute. So those would be the two things: get really good at discovery, be more strategic, and read the book and steal some of my ideas on the presentation and how to deliver that.
Awesome. All right, we're nearly at the end, the 30-minute mark. Forrest, that was awesome. I think we did the first interview about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
We're a little bit older now, but we know more. Thanks so much for sharing your insights, tips, best practices. One last tip, if there are salespeople struggling out there or afraid about AI, just like one, parting tip.
Yeah, I think it's here when people ask me something like that, my number one superpower and tip is to pay attention. People don't pay attention. The more you pay attention, I know it's generic to say, oh, you can be a good listener, it helps with sales. Yes, for sure. I'm talking deeper. Really pay attention to what people are saying and what's behind what they're saying. And the more you pay attention, you will find what I call the keys to the castle during the sales process. If someone keeps saying, well, I'm really concerned about this, and they're perseverating, as I call it, on the same topic over and over, which you will not pick up on if you're not paying attention. And then when you go do the pitch, you call back to their perseveration or their pain point, um, and connect the dots. And you remember on the discovery call when you were complaining about this thing? Let me show you how I'm going to solve that exact thing and using their words. That only comes from paying attention. So that's my number one tip. Pay attention.
Interesting. So we just came back from a Mexico vacation. We stayed at a very well-known hotel chain, and they have a club where you can buy into and then get cheaper
Oh,
vacation. So we did the presentation, and nice sales guy. Oh man, he did not pay attention to me. Like
yeah.
even cut me off. Like during, I was saying things, it just cut me off. He was like so determined to tell me, his stuff. And like
Right.
we did not, I was very interested, but man, that put me off and I clearly felt not understood. So yeah, I couldn't
Yeah,
agree
that's
more.
an extreme example, but people don't feel heard in a lot of cases in life. And so if you can just really genuinely listen to people, you won't just find nuggets to use, but they appreciate it. And you build that trust and respect when you pay attention and you really listen to them before you just go into your pitch and your static stuff, right?
Yeah, agree. Well, I did listen to your presentation at Agency Con. It actually really gave me a lot of clarity. Anybody interested in reaching out to Forrest? I'm going to put a link to his website below in the description field of the YouTube video, including the link to the book, Ace the Clone. Forrest, this was a pleasure. Let's do this sooner than 8 years again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you
Yeah.
having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch and then, stay safe and healthy. Thanks everybody for listening. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.